Okay, good afternoon. So I'm your finishing anchor of this exciting day, and I'm glad that I am because I try to entertain you guys and keep things fun. And in my line of business, it's not very difficult to do. Because one thing you're going to realize about divorce and family law, while it may not be one of those areas that interests all of you, it is very dramatic and very exciting. So every day I wake up at 9 o'clock in the morning. Well, I wake up earlier, but when I start my day at 9, I have no idea what's going to happen for the rest of the day and where I'm going to end up at 6 o'clock. So it is a very exciting thing, exciting area of law, but it isn't for everyone. So by show of hands, who has any interest in divorce and family law at all? Okay, it's good. It's good. 5 people out of the room. It's good. Usually, that's actually not bad. I usually, by this time, everybody's sleeping, so I don't even get any hands. But yeah, so this is what I do. And there was a time in my life when I had to look in the mirror and find out why I decided to do this and look at myself and see, how did I come to become a divorce attorney person that deals with everyone's emotions, feelings, kids, families, heartaches and pains. And it's not an easy process because, people are going to ask you, if any of you ever decide to pursue this career, people are going to ask you, why is it that you want to dig around people's dirty laundry and deal with who slept with who and who's not happy with who? I mean, don't you have your own life to deal with? Why do this? But what we do as family attorneys is absolutely necessary. And I come across this every day because we deal with what I call the human condition, right? So there are areas of law that deal with contracts and mergers and businesses and money, but what we deal with is emotions, anger, anxiety, love, hate, psychology. And so the people that we work with are the ones that need lawyers, I feel, the ones that need lawyers the most. Because it's almost like when they get to my office, there's a sign on my door, abandon logic, stop doing first grade math, and only follow your feelings, right? So, it's like if you guys remember what it was like when you were, or even now, if you know what it's like to have a disagreement with your significant other and how you feel at that moment, and you just become a bit irrational and you kind of start, feeling that the room is spinning and you say things that you don't really mean and you do things you may not really want to do. Well, imagine that that's multiplied by 1,000 now, okay? And so it's okay to feel that way because this is the human condition where, this is the area of law that deals with emotions. And so it's okay to do that. And so these people that come to us for help, they're the ones that need it most because they're not able to do these things themselves. Their judgment is very much clouded by how they feel and what is going on with them. So they can't make up a schedule for holidays with their children when they come to me and they say to me, well, what should we do? How do we divide the kids? How do we do this? I say, well, this is really simple. There are 2 weeks. You take one, the other person takes one, and we're done. But they can't do that because what they'll do is like, oh, what do you mean? Like, he has the whole week, and I won't see my kids for 7 days? Yeah, that's a pretty reasonable solution because you two are not living together anymore. But they don't see it. It just escapes them completely because they're in the moment of hating each other or not wanting to share or whatever it is. And these emotions that are overflowing their brain and the chemistry that's going on is prohibiting them from doing things that everyday people can do with their eyes closed. So this is why this is important. This is why this area of law and the lawyers in this area of law are very much needed. People always say, with technology taking over, how, pretty soon a lot of areas of law are already affected, by technology, by artificial intelligence replacing what lawyers do every day. But I am one of those people that says it doesn't matter to me what kind of technology they'll invent, because unless artificial intelligence is capable of understanding love, hate, jealousy, unless once artificial intelligence can do that, maybe I will think about it, but not until then, because my clients are the ones that are dealing with these commodities. These are the things you need to be able to understand and appreciate and know how to deal with in order to help people in divorce and family law. Other people say, well, less people are getting married. The institution of marriage is no longer necessary. People don't care anymore to get married. They just live together, have children. So pretty soon, divorce law is going to be affected by that. And I say that that's nonsense as well, because the simple rule is, if human beings, regardless of their gender, or even if they don't identify with any gender at all, as long as they form bonds and do things together, as long as those bonds are driven by human emotions, and as long as they start things and they cohabit together, I don't really care if they're called husband and wife, partners, domestic partners. It makes no difference. There will come a point for 20, 30, 40% of those relationships where something will go wrong, they will not see eye to eye, and then they will turn into these, unreasonable people who no longer can talk to each other, and the things that they share, children, property, whatever it is, they will need someone to step in and help them to apply logic and reason again to divide those things properly and fairly. So this is just like an overview, I guess, my take on why, only 5 of you raised your hand, and that's fine, but maybe down the road, many of you will consider this area as well, because it's super interesting, it is drama-driven, and it is very exciting, and it's very necessary and important in the grand scheme of things, okay? But this lecture is very short. It's 1 hour, so it's really kind of designed to give you a bit of an overview of what the lifestyle is like of divorce and family lawyers, kind of like what, if you're thinking about this area, why would you want to pursue it, and to give you a bit of an overview of basics of what we deal with, in terms of the law. I mean, you could take classes, I think, that are more extensive into the law itself, but I don't think this is the lecture. This is more like an intro to give you a bit of an overview. So, okay, so this area of law is not for everyone. And I think this lecture is meant to be 2 hours, so I'm going to go through some of these slides much quicker. But basically, to do this, you have to appreciate drama. And so if you're one of those people that likes to watch action movies, and anytime they have like a family scene, or like, you can't stomach watching The Notebook and things like that, this may not be for you, okay? So, and I, for me, the moment came when, when I met my wife, we used to watch TV together, and she would want to watch an action movie, and I'd be like going through channels, and there's Lifetime, and I'd stop. And then she'd look at me and say, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "But this is a good movie. Someone has cancer, they're dying, the husband has a lover, now he doesn't know what to do. We got to see what happens." She's like, "You sure that this is the right relationship for you? Because, I mean, this, I don't understand. You shouldn't be watching this, right?" But this was my thing, Downton Abbey, 90210, Luke Perry, God bless his soul out there, These were my shows. I had to keep it secret. I could not tell anyone, but I used to videotape these shows and watch them. And that is because I was always interested in drama, just the way humans interact, the way people form relationships, why people fall in love, why they fall out of love, how they deal with tragedy, how they deal with happiness. Those things interested me. So that, I think, kind of gives you a bit of, segue into maybe thinking that this area might be for you. But if you hate that, and you know it now, this area of law will probably annoy you to no return, because you become an actor, director, all of this is every day. So you come to work, you meet with a client, they start telling you, and the first thing clients tell you is what hurts, right? So they come and they don't talk to you about logistics. They don't say, "We have 2 children, it's a 10-year marriage, we both make X amount of dollars as a property." No, they come in and they say, "You have to understand what she did to me." Okay, she slept with her boss. And then you're like, "Okay, but New York is a no-fault divorce state. So everything that's going to come out of your mouth between now and the next 30 minutes is just pure movie material, but completely irrelevant to the facts that I need in order to, construct your case. But these are people, so they don't come to tell you facts. They come to tell you why they're there, what hurts them, why there's a problem. And you can't stop them and say, look, hold on. I don't really care about why you're here. I don't care who slept with whom. I just need names, dates, social security numbers, date of marriage, place of marriage. We have caps and we have a formula that calculates child support. I could do this in 10 minutes and send you on your way. You cannot do that because these people are upset and they're hurt. And it's kind of like, being a doctor here. Someone comes to you, you could just say, go to the x-ray room, take an x-ray. I don't care how it happened. If it's a broken bone, I'll know what to do. So, but that can't be done. You have to listen. So this is where the drama comes in. This is where your ability to sympathize with these people, understand what has happened to them, why this hurts them, why this is important comes into play. You have to be able to do that and not be annoyed by it and appreciate that these are real things that happen to people. They may not happen to you, but they happen all around. So this is something that has to be done. Right, so a lot of people say, how do I know that this might be a good area for me? So if you're one of those people that likes the law and likes to be very technical and likes to read a lot of cases and likes to kind of stay with the statutes, this isn't going to work. Why? Because this law continuously changes. It's a hybrid machine. And not only it is affected by the fact patterns of your cases that are somewhat similar, but usually there are major differences, but also everything is decided by judges, one person, including trial. So there is no jury of your peers. It's just one person sitting there listening to the entire story and then making a decision. And these judges interject their personal views and their personal opinions about what they believe is right and wrong into these cases because, once again, they are human. So you have judges, when you come in front of them, you have the non-moneyed spouse, you have a woman that hasn't worked for 15 years, you go in front of one judge. I'm not allowed to name names. I named names in one of these lectures and I was told not to. But you go in front of one judge and you say, Judge, my client hasn't worked for 15 years. Last time she did anything, she used a typewriter. Today, her skills are aged out. She can't do anything anymore. She'll need time to rehabilitate and get retrained in order to get a job. So this judge will say, I understand this situation. I appreciate this, and I'm going to make sure that she has financial support from the moneyed spouse, husband, wife, whatever the gender roles are there, to make sure that she can get retrained, and I'm going to give her, a bit of a runway to graduate into this new existence because now she's alone. She's got no money, she's got no job, and let's say there are children involved, so she needs time. And then you go in front of a different judge, and the same judge looks at her and goes, what's wrong with her? Why can't she work? And you say, well, 15 years pass by. The judge says, well, she's got arms, she's got legs. Minimum wage was recently raised to $18 an hour. I know places that are hiring. She needs to go get a job counsel. Next time you come back in 30 days, I want to see her working. I want to see her doing something because I'm not okay with her sitting back trying to figure out her next move because her children need her. And this is New York, chop, chop. Okay? And then the law is the same. The law hasn't changed, but same case, different judges, different attitude, different approach. And as an attorney, you have to figure out how to deal with that. So if you're one of those people that really likes to, stick to the letter of the law and expects the law to be the same every day, this will be a disaster for you because you won't be able to understand why everything changes. From courtroom to courtroom, from judge to judge, things change. Okay? So it's also a very inefficient system. So it's one of those systems where it sucks, right? But it's the best thing we have in this city. Okay? So every year they try to improve it and they try to amend it and make changes, and they do. And some of those changes are good and some are not. But at the end of the day, it's such an inefficient system because there are too many people and there are not enough resources to understand everyone's story. So the judges will have a long list of cases every morning, and they just don't have time to understand why one woman who's been out of work for 15 years is different from a different woman. One guy who isn't working and took the responsibilities for the children is different from another guy. They just don't have time, so they do things quickly, and there are lots of loopholes and gaps. So another thing that I think a lot of lawyers struggle with in divorce and family law is just dealing with this very inefficient system that isn't fair and changes every day. Cases are fact-driven, so this is all factual. Your motions are mostly going to be very much like writing a script for one of these shows. So you have to, it's all about what has happened, who has done what. It's not so, methodical like some of these other areas of law. So another thing, again, you have to be a person that kind of can deal with that. But if you want to help people, once again, this goes back to my earlier point of why you would want to do this. If you genuinely enjoy working with people and helping them, this might be a good area for you to pursue. There are lots of tears. There are lots of very difficult emotional issues. It requires you yourself to be very psychologically stable, because a lot of the lawyers, and you guys hear this all the time, but a lot of the attorneys in divorce and family law tend to have personal issues, and it comes from doing this job, okay? Because we see some really dark places and some really dark things. And it's one thing if it's money, right? Because at the end of the day, you lose some, you win some, who cares? But once you've seen some things where people are using their children, where children are suffering, or when people are suffering, or when you have a person who goes from making $500,000 a year and divorce process completely devastates them, that they have to declare bankruptcy and they're at the bottom, that's very difficult if it's on your watch. If you're the person that was involved with that and that happened and you were taking part, it's very difficult to bring that home. So your personal psychological stability and your ability to deal with stressful situations is a important aspect of doing this job. You have to be very creative in this area because, a lot of times these scenarios that we deal with, these cases, you can't just apply the same system to everyone. So you have to understand what people do, why they do it, and try to tailor solutions to them. So, a lot of times, let's say there's a property, both people are on the property, but, one person, they're both on the deed, and now there's a divorce, and they have an agreement who's going to keep the house. But the other person who's on the deed doesn't want to be on the deed anymore and on the mortgage and responsible. So you have to create a solution how to get that person off the deed. But then again, there are issues because that person who is on the deed doesn't want to get off the deed unless XYZ happens, unless the support has been paid or unless something else has been done. So you're constantly inventing, custom solutions for families, and creativity becomes something that you definitely need to work with. So the process starts with someone coming into your office and saying that they want a divorce. And so the first thing I do basically is to make sure they're in the right place. And the way I do that is I give them a very simple analogy. So when relationships break or when there's trouble in relationships, it's like people coming into the hospital. So it's like the emergency room. So your relationship is wheeled in and it has issues. It's bleeding. Maybe it got shot or maybe it got stabbed, whatever the case is. So the ER doctor has to look at this and say, is this something that could be saved? Can I you jump in, you try to resuscitate it, you try to put a fix on it. And then, that's what the marriage counselors and that's what the therapists do, right? So Their job is to kind of be the ER doctor on the floor, and when something is wheeled in that's broken, they try to stabilize it and they try to find how to resuscitate things. So if you just had a fight or something happened, they'll talk to you, they'll try to get to the bottom of it, what is going on, what the course of treatment is going to be. But ultimately, the goal is to save it, right? We, the divorce attorneys, we're the morgue. We don't save anyone. Our job is we only deal with dead bodies, right? So if it's got to have no pulse, and it's got to have no circulation, and it's got to be dead. And then we are the ones that are responsible for having a nice service, putting it 6 feet under, giving you a really nice, either a really long and expensive funeral or a really short one, whichever you choose. But one thing we do not do is resuscitate relationships, right? So I would say that 30% of the people that come to us think that they have a dead body for a relationship. And that's because they interpret the first sign of trouble, or maybe the 10th sign of trouble, as the end. So they come, but they're not ready. So when I speak to them, the first thing I find out is whether or not this marriage is dead. Okay? And for many, it's not. It's just it's just a bump on the road. And they just don't know what to do. So the first thing they did was call the morgue, right? So once I get a sense that this person isn't emotionally ready or mentally ready to end the marriage, I kick them out because they're in the wrong department, because they need to go back up a couple floors to speak to the doctors that try to resuscitate and fix things. And there are many ways to do that. You kind of like over time when you're doing it, you get better at telling, who's who. Mostly, I will tell you, mostly it's like it's on their face. Some people come in and you kind of look at them and you can see that they're done. It doesn't matter how many times you ask them this question. It's a 20-year marriage. You have children together. You're sure this is what you want to do? I just want to make sure before we get going on this funeral. And their face kind of shows it. They just don't care. Doesn't matter what you tell them. They've made up their mind. But then there are others that come in and they're in distress. Like it's just because something went wrong at home. There was a fight. There was a misunderstanding. But they're not quite ready to throw in the towel on this thing. And then I tell those people, first step for you is to figure out if you are ready to put this to rest. Because what happens after I get going isn't going to help to resuscitate this relationship at all. In fact, divorce process will drive a wedge even deeper into what is going on because it becomes adversarial. There are sides immediately, right? There'll be the lawyer and the husband, the lawyer and the wife, and so it becomes a contest, sort of speak, of two sides, and now sides start operating independently. You can't do that if you're trying to save things. So for divorce lawyers, it's very important. A lot of divorce lawyers I know don't take this step. They don't care. You come in, you're ready to pay, you're ready to retain, they'll give you a funeral. Doesn't matter. But for me, I don't like, for personal reasons, I'm one of the divorce attorneys that supports institution of marriage, very much so. So for me, I wouldn't break an institution of marriage. I wouldn't break a bond between people that they formed and found each other in this very large world at some point and made a decision to be together unless that decision was wrong and unless the person is really ready to step out. Okay? So the other thing that is critical to keep in mind during consultations is to inquire about domestic violence. And this is sort of like the dark side of things. Domestic violence has many faces, right? It's like if you guys watch the Game of Thrones, it's like death, right? The little girl always says death has many faces, right? So this is domestic violence. You have to understand that it's not always obvious. You don't always have to say, does your spouse hit you, right? Because if they ever say that they do, sure, that already is a big signal. But a lot of the times it's mental. It's psychological. It's abuse that comes in many, many forms, and you have to watch for it, from the minute someone steps into your office. Because if you miss it, you could be missing the biggest problem that exists. And it's a matter of safety and health for that person and for the children, if there are children in the house. So what we do is essentially ask questions in many different ways. First, the obvious ones: is there any, physical violence? And then you ask the not so obvious questions: are you being does your spouse disparage you in front of the children? Are you being called names? Are you being told that you're worthless and you're worth nothing? And do you feel trapped in this house that you can't leave? So these are all possible signs of a problem. And it's not always a problem, but sometimes it is. So if there is any indication of that, you have to tell the client that they have to be super careful. As attorneys, we can't help with that. They must contact the police if there's an emergency or if these things take place. But part of your job, if you take on representation of that person, is to be very, very sensitive to what is going on and monitor that these problems don't escalate into something more serious. So once someone has decided that they want a divorce, essentially in New York, there are two types of divorces. And I divide them in two categories: the uncontested and the contested. The uncontested divorce, the way I interpret that, is when two people solve all their issues, and we'll go over what those are, but essentially it's financial issues, division of property and assets, spousal support, if they have children, custody, parenting time, physical custody, legal custody, but all those things must be resolved between the two people before anything goes to the court. So, and it doesn't have to be done by the two of them, although it could be done with attorneys, but the idea of an uncontested divorce is that the process, the collaborative process of two sides sitting down and working through those issues has to continue, and at the end there has to be a settlement that is reached where, well, I can't say people are happy, no one's ever happy, but something that they could live with and something that both sides find to be fair. So that is the essence of an uncontested divorce. Essentially, a divorce like that, there's a negotiation, and at the end, a settlement agreement is signed describing all the resolutions, and it is packaged together with a bunch of other documents, such as affidavits from both sides that they've accepted service of legal documents, and there's some medical forms. Essentially, it's a package that is then filed with the court on an uncontested track, which means you're telling the court that you don't require their help, everything's resolved, and you just need the judge's signature. They do read through the papers because they look for certain things that must be in there. For example, if you have children, there has to be child support in there. So one thing that people always try to do is come in and say, oh, we made a deal. My husband's not going to pay me child support because I get to keep the Bentley. And that doesn't work because child support belongs to the children. So in New York, you cannot negotiate. The parents have no right to negotiate about child support, and child support provisions have to go in there. So if you're doing an uncontested divorce, it's great that you got it done, and it's great for the clients, but the court will still look for certain things in those documents to be in place. And if all is well, you would guess, how long do you think after you've submitted all your papers and your clients have solved all their issues, how long do you think it will take for them to be divorced in New York? Anybody? 12 weeks? No. Almost. Almost. Kings County last year was up to 10 months. 10 months after you have finalized everything with this person. You went through this really emotional roller coaster of negotiating things. You are now ready to be done and be free. And then your papers go to Kings County, and it takes them 10 months just to process the papers. So for 10 more months, almost a year, you still have a spouse, which in your mind you already lost. You already moved on, but not until those papers are signed. Some counties are faster. New York County is about 3 to 5 months, I would say. But yeah, Kings County was notorious for extending this to 10 months. And again, that is the backlog of the cases that they face. It's not really their fault. It's just that they're very, very busy. A lot of people in Brooklyn just, happen to get divorced. I don't know what the solution is. So maybe it's in the water. But that's divorce number one. Divorce number two is everything else. Everything else. So anytime the two sides cannot reach an agreement on one or 101 issues that they face, and you require the court to step in and do anything for you, that is a contested case. That means that there is a problem that can't be solved. Now, a lot of different law firms and lawyers go, their own way about what they call an uncontested divorce or a contested divorce and how hard they try to help people get an uncontested divorce. And that goes back to the ethical and moral dilemma. The longer divorce takes, the divorce attorneys, we work on an hourly basis. So the longer something takes, the more money the divorce is going to cost and the more money it's going to bring to your practice. So, there is this dilemma, which we will talk about because I have my take on it too. But yes, some firms are not going to try really hard because if it's not that they're going to make the case more complicated and extend it on purpose, but they're just not going to give their all to settle it. They're just going to say, well, you know what, here are a couple of solutions. If you don't like them, okay, let's just go to court. So it just depends on your philosophy of doing business in this field. And I don't knock anyone's hustle. I think that there's place for everyone. I appreciate that it's a business, and a lot of lawyers will treat it as that. And they'll say, look, I'm not pouring gasoline into the fire. I'm just going like this, and I'm not going to call the firefighters. I'm just going to keep and do this, and I'm trying to extinguish it as much as I can. And, I have kids too. So that's, it's fine. But that's how it works. So in New York, divorces, most cases, 97% of cases, will fall under no-fault grounds. What does that mean? That means no one in the judicial system, not the judges, not the lawyers, not the law clerks, not the security guard downstairs, no one cares why you want to get divorced. No one. Okay? And it's very hard for people to appreciate because what they want to do is only talk about why. They don't really want to focus on getting divorced. They just want to talk about why. And again, that's a human condition because if you guys remember, if you're dating, something goes wrong, the guy doesn't call you fast enough, the girl doesn't call you fast enough, you want to tell someone, you call your friend and you stop telling them. You don't go about it this way. You don't say, listen, I went on 2 dates with this person, so statistically speaking, the fact that they didn't call me, there's nothing really wrong with that. We've gone on 2 dates. It's okay. No, you say, oh, you know what? We had a connection, and you want to start telling the story. So, and that's the human factor in this. But New York became a no-fault state. Why? Because if we listened to everyone's story, we would have divorces that would not be signed for 5 years. So to streamline things, no one cares why. And that's hard. And that's very hard. Because I have people walking in, guy walks in, and he says, Mr. Kleyman, my case is different. Okay, well, every time I hear that, I get ready, and I'm very excited because I'm really hopeful that, he's married to like an alligator or something like that. And it's New York. You never know. You never know. So there are two guys raising a baby like doll as a child. This was in the news. Google it. It's like they're raising this doll as a child and legitimately parade it around the city as if it's their child, but it's a doll. So. But anyway, I get excited, and he says, my wife, she cheated on me, and this is going to be an easy case because I have provided for her and for our family our whole life. And, basically everything we have, everything we own is because of me. She stayed home, she didn't work, and so I worked my whole life very hard, and all these things, and in our culture, and they were from the Middle East. He says to me, in our culture, once it comes out that she cheated on me, basically she will renounce everything. Like she's not going to want the house. She's going to get the kids. and I'm going to see them. But as far as finances, like, she's not going to ask for $1 because in our culture, it's very unacceptable, and it's a shame. It's like a shameful thing to do this. And so this is going to be an easy case. You're going to call her, lawyer and tell her lawyer that I have video of her cheating on me. So if he gives you any trouble, this should be easy. So I pause and I say to him, well, tell me, like, what do you have? And he's like, well, I installed a camera in our bedroom when I was suspicious that she was having an affair. And I recorded this video. And he says, in HD, 1080p. So I said, yes, that's great. So he's like, it's in HD. And I have hours of footage. I'm like, hours? And I'm like, how many visits or trysts are there? He's like, this guy's been there at least 5 times. I'm like, hours? I mean, maybe they're both in the wrong business. Maybe they should go in the porn industry. I mean, that's quite an achievement. But sure. And he's like, so what I have is the footage of them in HD having intercourse. And then he's like, on the last day, I walked her into the same bedroom. I confronted her about the affair. And she admitted to me, again, on HD video, that she had it, and she's sorry, and she admitted to the whole thing. So we now have this evidence. There's no one that's going to be able to say anything to defend her. Once this evidence is out, she's not going to get $1. I want her out of my house. I want her to get her things and leave. Here's my job, to tell him that no one's going to watch that video, right? And so he's like, but I brought it. I want you to see it. I'm like, I don't want to see it. I'm sure it's very interesting, 5 hours, but no one cares. No one's going to watch it. He's like, well, we could certainly use it in court. I'm like, no. That video is for your private collection. But if I was you, I would burn it and never look at it again because it's psychologically damaging and it'll haunt you. 5 hours, all 5 hours of it. Don't do it. And he's like, well, certainly the judge is going to take into consideration her wrong act. And I said, no, because what we have is a system of legal judgment, not moral judgment. Moral judgment happens somewhere else, up there, whatever you believe, but not here. This is a system that's designed only to focus on children, assets, and getting two people to go their separate ways, and we don't pass judgment on fault. So no one's going to watch the video. And then he says, well, then if no one's going to watch the video, trust me, once she finds out I have it, she will be so ashamed. She'll be so ashamed that she's going to herself and her lawyer walk away from everything. And I said to him, that's not going to happen. That's just not going to happen. He's like, just try it. Call the lawyer. I call the lawyer, and I say to him, I already know the answer to this, but I just want you to know, just between us, that my client has this footage. It's 5 hours. And he goes, counselor, stop right there. My client wants spousal support, 50% of the marital residence, and I'm filing a motion for exclusive occupancy. So I would appreciate if your client packed his bags and nicely removed himself from the residence. Okay, and if you're okay with that, I also would like attorney's fees because your client makes $200,000 and my client makes $20,000. So when you're done watching that video, the two of you should have a conversation about doing all these things. So now I have to go back to my client and explain to another person who just has been wrong. I mean, the fact that this guy's been wronged morally, on the global scale is undeniable, right? But I have to go back to him and explain to him why none of that matters. Why he still has to pay her attorney, he still has to pay her support, and there's still a house that's going to be divided, irrespective of how the world maybe should work. And the fact that in the Muslim culture, this was a taboo didn't play a part. Because guess what? He threatened her to release the video. He went to her and tried to blackmail her directly. And he said to her, if you do this, you know, I'm going to tell everyone. Everyone is going to know that this is what you've done. But in this city, money talks. So she evaluated her, you know, shame, and on the other scale, she put the fact that she needs to live and she needs to support herself and she has children to think of, and, you know, she needs to make sure she could live the rest of her life. And she chose the money, and she'll deal with the shame because that's how it works out. So this goes to the part where, you know, the fault is difficult. It's difficult for clients to understand because everybody, we tend to think that the way the world works is there's right and wrong. But in matrimonial, that's irrelevant, and that's hard to tell people. But the case starts under no-fault grounds mostly. We do still have grounds, but the judges prefer not to have cases on grounds. But you can bring a case on grounds if you want. All that would require is that you first have to try your case on the grounds and prove grounds, and then proceed with the uncontested divorce or no-fault divorce. Okay. So, so basically, the case starts. You start it by filing a summons and notice or a summons and complaint, like you start every civil case, and you serve it on the other side, and you begin settlement discussions. And then the next thing you have to look at is any emergency. So what you want to do in divorce and family law is you want to stabilize the situation and instill status quo. What you want to keep, the cases can go from a month to 3 years. And you want to make sure you put something in place that keeps the litigants, you know, fed, a roof over their head, they could sustain themselves, and you are less disruptive to the children as possible. So there are lots of emergency motions that happen in the very beginning because the household's split. So the husband will leave or the wife will leave, or, you know, but you still have the liabilities and responsibilities running, and you have to instill some things. So there are a lot of emergencies that happen right off the bat. Someone will say, well, if, you know, I need to go. I can't stay in this house, but I have no money, or I have to take the kids with me, or a father will say, well, I'm ready to leave. I could leave, but I want to see my children now. I can't wait 2 months to be given a schedule. So then you deal with some emergency motions right off the bat. They're called the pendente lite motion or temporary motion. So those motions are designed to get the judge to look at the situation and put in some immediate status quo into the case, like what the next 2 to 6 months are going to be like for these people while the case continues and the court becomes more familiar with their circumstances. Also, attorney's fees go in there as well. We do have a law on the books, unlike many other states, that allows attorneys to take on representation of non-moneyed spouses, because the law says that if in a situation where one spouse has a lot more financial resources than the other, you're allowed to apply for attorney's fees early on in the onset of the case as someone who represents the less moneyed spouse. And the court should kind of equalize the scales so that both people are able to have counsel of their choosing, because you'll have big disbalances. And so you'll have, you know, let's say a wife who is an executive and she can hire whichever law firm she wants, but a husband who is, you know, works and makes $50,000 is very limited, because the retainers, right? Retainers for matrimonial, most of the respective firms will take at least 20, 30-hour retainer. Could be $8, $10, $15,000. So if you're making 40, 50,000, you don't have that kind of money in the bank. So the attorney fee law allows basically for attorneys to take on cases with very small retainers, knowing in advance that it's not going to be enough to handle a case like this, and make an application to the court and say, look, you know, they got 20,000 on this case, but I only got 5, so equalize this and make sure that we both have money to help these people do what they need to do. So in the beginning, once you file your case, attorneys will exchange some financials, preliminary financials, such as it could be a statement of net worth, it could be income tax returns, W-2s, but the idea is you want to try to discuss settlement. You know, because that is in the best interest of the parties. Because the bottom line in divorces is the longer these things last, the more difficult and more financially unaffordable they become for people. So, And as an attorney, you really don't want that either. You don't want to be on a case where your client runs out of money, now you have to get off this case, you don't really finish your job. So it's not a good thing for anyone. That's why you do want to try to settle the cases quickly. You want to put together at least, and a lot of attorneys don't do this, but I start off every case. At least I want to know how far apart I am from what the other side wants. And if it's a big gap, sure, fine, we can't close it. But maybe some things could be settled and the big gap could be left for the court to resolve. But I always like to know where I am. But if that doesn't work, you're going to move forward and you're going to file an RJI. And basically, you're telling the court that the settlement talks have broken down. Now you want the court to step in, and then you'll do a preliminary conference, at which point the court is going to set a schedule for you to do things like discovery, depositions, exchange of financials, but now formally. So in divorce and family law, everything is discoverable, including social media. And this was not a factor until social media became huge and people stopped talking to each other and started talking over social media. But still, till today, the very first thing I do when clients come in and retain us, we actually assign their social media profiles to one of our paralegals for monitoring, because they will go and do things that we tell them not to do. So if you're going to go and take your new girlfriend or boyfriend to Miami for a weekend and spend $10,000, but the theory of my case is that you have no money to support your wife that you're still not divorced from, and there are pictures of you, doing all kinds of poses and going to nightclubs, and you tag yourself in all these expensive restaurants, the other side is going to get that information, and once I tell them, my client can't pay anymore, he's barely surviving himself, there are 2 households, they're going to flash those pictures, and that is acceptable, especially in interim of cases. Like a trial, you might be able to keep some of this evidence out if you're good. But in the interim, when you're arguing immediate issues, the judges will listen to anything. And their ears perk up as soon as they hear that someone's partying and blowing money away on, they've moved on while the kids and the ex-wife are still struggling, or an ex-spouse. So you have to be careful. And you have to monitor social media profiles right away, but people will not do it. They'll think like, because I won't use Facebook, I'll use Instagram, or I won't use the big platforms, I'll use I'll just text, right? So we all know what happened to Tiger Woods. That was a great idea, right? Text your mistress all the things that you want, and then that all comes out right away. So text messages, any digital media basically is all discoverable. You could subpoena Facebook, you could subpoena Google, you could subpoena the phone carriers. So I could get my hands on anything that comes out of your phone. So essentially your phone is your biggest enemy once you get divorced. If you are having an affair, or if you already moved on, that you have to be very, very careful what you do with that phone in hand. Then it's a civil, so matrimonial cases are civil cases. So you'll proceed through discovery proceedings. There'll be a time of exchange of documents, just like any civil case, like any commercial or business litigation. Discovery could be very simple if these people just, let's say, have a house and a bunch of credit cards, or it could be extensive and last over a year. If people have stocks, bonds, trusts, their businesses involved, right, where they have partners, they control certain shares. There are cases where businesses have cash coming in, so you'll have, a spouse that says, I make $50,000, here's my income tax return. And you look at it and you say, yeah, but when you guys were married, your marital expenses were $25K a month, right? So you make $50,000, she makes $20,000, that's $70. After taxes, that's about $50, right? After you've paid your rent and food for your children, you're down to like $30. Well, which one of you is growing money in the back of your apartment? Like, how does this make any sense? So here's the thing about being very creative with your taxes. Divorce judges are not bound by your income tax returns, right? So you can lie to the IRS and maybe get away with it for a number of years, because it's like a random lottery who gets audited and who doesn't. There are people that cheat on their taxes for like 50 years and nothing happens to them. And then there's a guy who college student that files his first tax return after he has a $30,000 job and gets audited, you know. So, but the divorce judge is not bound by any of that. That's just suggestive evidence to them what to do with you. They have this thing called, they can presume that you make certain amount of money based on their own judgment of what was presented to them, and they could just ignore your tax returns. So you can go in there and say, yeah, judge, my tax return, I make $50,000, but if I present my case to show that what you're actually trying to say here is a mathematical impossibility, then there will be discovery. I will appoint an auditor to audit your business. There will be somebody sitting in your restaurant counting every dollar that is paid by all your customers, and I will find out what you make. And when I do, here's the great part about this. The judges are bound to report any tax issues to the IRS. And IRS is bound to audit you immediately when that happens. So it's a really great tool because it's almost like, yeah, so if you were really creative with your taxes and your whatever you were doing, and now you want to play games in divorce and you don't want to be fair to your spouse, this isn't the time. Because if I discover something that you did not declare, all I have to do is show it to the judge. Judges will actually do this, which is really scary. They will stop lawyers when they hear that this is coming. They'll stop you and they'll take everyone in the back and they'll say, counsel, I stopped you because the next word that would come out of your mouth would mean an IRS audit for everyone in this room. And I don't want to do that. So how about you don't say that? Everyone goes outside in the hallway and settles this case now. Because if I say that one word, that judge has to make a phone call, okay? And the IRS will audit you. They're happy to do that. They're happy to do that, especially if a Supreme Court judge is pointing them in the direction. And their audit is already done by me. I already have everything. So all they got to do is pick it up, right? So, you also have, so there is a discovery process. There are depositions. Depositions are only on financial issues. So a lot of people wonder if people get deposed about whether or not you're a good parent or, you know, whether you hit your kids or things like that. No. So depositions are used only for financial purposes. We do not depose people on parenting issues. So, but on financials, absolutely. This is the time where if you need to know something, it's a very useful tool. Right? Because people are very good at hiding behind their lawyers, and they're very good at filling out statements of net worth and signing them. It says under oath, but no one cares, right? When they're sitting in front of you, and if you're good at what you do, and you know how to read people, and you know how to get to them, they will stumble. Because what they're not prepared for, a deposition is almost like a trial, except for there are no real rules. Like as long as your questions are relevant and they're on point with what you're trying to establish, you're going to be allowed to ask them. And there's no control. Like as long as you're respectful to the clients and the attorneys there, you can maneuver your questions any way you like, and you could trap people in their lies because they won't see it coming. Because they come to these depositions thinking, I'm going to wing this, you know, I'm just going to answer these questions. I know my business, I know my finances. What they don't know is that there's a lawyer on the other side of this who spent, you know, maybe 48 hours drafting his questions and trying to figure out how to trap you in your lies. And once that happens, that deposition transcript becomes something that you use at trial to impeach them. So then they start stumbling all over the place and no one believes what they say at all. So then you'll do a compliance conference. There's a bunch of them that you do. Those are designed to let the court know where you are in your process of discovery. And once you're done with all of that, there's a pretrial conference. You bring your proposed certificates of disposition. This is where you tell the court what each side wants out of this divorce and how they see it. And this is the last time that the judges or the judge's clerk will try to help people resolve the case pre-trial, because trial will set you back, again, based on the law firm, but you're talking anywhere between 50 to 100K, okay? And that is because our trials are spread over 4 or 5 days. And these trials are complicated because of the subject matter. So all the witnesses are difficult because, again, they're dealing with hate. Like they hate each other, right? It's not like when you're deposing an insurance company executive who it's a job and the guy does like 50 of these trials or depositions. It's a job. These people, it's like, this is it. This is what they've been waiting for this entire divorce. It's like the husband versus the wife, whatever the case is, and it's do or die, and it's their chance to, obliterate the other side. So they become difficult witnesses to get information. Like you'll ask them their name, and they'll be like, you should know it, counsel, right? I'm like, okay, how old is your child? Well, can't you calculate? You have the birth date, and I have to ask the same question 3 times. So one of my cases just went to the appellate division, and we argued this case because during this case, this was a case where my client would refuse to take a paternity DNA test, and it was a collateral estoppel issue where we were saying that there's a different, the mother was married to another guy, and the guy has been in the child's life, presumably, for 5 years, acting as his father. So the child knew this man to be his father, and then I guess the wife never told him that he wasn't the biological father until much later, and much later she decided to pursue the biological father for child support. The biological father came in and said, I haven't seen you, I've never seen the child, and I shouldn't have to take the DNA test. But the law is, DNA test is so simple, now it's such a simple procedure that it's quicker to take the DNA test than have everyone go to court and guess if you're the father or not. So, but the point I'm trying to make with the appellate division is the trial on this case was stopped by a judge in family court after about 10 minutes of examination of the mother. So the judge stopped the trial and said, I've heard enough, I made up my mind, father takes the test. So we went to the appellate division and said, well, in those 20 minutes that we had to ask the mother questions, we only got to we got barely through basic information because it took 3 attempts to ask her something, and she just wouldn't cooperate. She just gave nonsense answers and was very evasive. So we'll see how that case comes out, because some of the appellate judges said that we really should have just asked the questions that we really needed answers to and not lay a foundation of like how old her child was. And we've argued that that's not how you ask questions during trial. You really have to find, you can't just put a witness on the stand and start talking. You have to find out what their relationship is to the case. But yeah, so there are lots of issues. I'm going to go over this really, really quickly because I think I'm already over the time. So on the child side, custody, there's the physical custody where the kids live, and there's legal custody, who makes major decisions. Major decisions are medical, religion, education, and now it's braces. Braces is considered a big, big decision. People cannot agree, and it's somewhat medical, somewhat cosmetic, but it is a big deal because, people will disagree when to put on braces and if to put them on or not. But these are just decisions. So what you can do is you can have joint legal custody. You can have 2 spouses make decisions together, 50-50. But that has to be something that both spouses want. If both spouses don't agree to that, the court cannot make them work together, and will have to choose one. So you have, it's now called parenting time, not so much visitation, but it is the issue of the parent that doesn't reside with the kids has a schedule, and it's a constitutional right to be able to see and raise your child, so that has to be put in place. There's child support issues. There's a formula up to $148,000. It's a simple formula. You plug numbers in, and it comes out with a number. Over $148,000, it's discretionary to the court. Same thing happens for spousal support. The number is $184,000. That's a cap. If it's combined income over $184,000, then the court has discretion, but up to $184,000, it's a simple formula, so we just put numbers in and a number comes out. But as you can all imagine, none of that is as simple and as quick as I'm making it sound to be here. But Equitable distribution is when you divide all your assets. Essentially, the court starts off with the idea that if you've lived together and contributed jointly to all your assets, they're divided 50-50, but we're equity state, which means each side can argue that their input into any asset was greater than the other side's, and this is where it gets interesting because everyone argues that. So very few people come in and say, yes, I agree, we both live together, put our money together, should be 50-50. The first thing they say is, I made more money, or I cleaned the house, or I picked out the colors in the bedroom, so that I've done more. And so pensions are divided. That's another interesting thing. A lot of people forget. Pensions are like money in the bank. Those pensions are appraised. It doesn't matter what kind you have. There are a whole bunch of different pensions out there. They're all appraised. And those, the courts have been pretty clear that they want those divided 50-50 pretty much. Businesses, all those things, bank accounts, all of those are divided. There are marital agreements, prenups and postnups. Those control what happens during divorces and make everyone's life a lot easier if you're getting divorced. So if any of you in this room are not married yet and thinking about getting married, this is a very good idea. It's like a life insurance policy. No one plans to die, but you do have life insurance because you understand that if you happen to die, you leave, you're gone, but the debt's not gone and problems are not gone, and they're left for others. This is the same thing. You sign one of these. You don't have to believe in it. You just sign it and you put it away. You put it you bury it somewhere, and you just don't ever look at it again if you live happily ever after. But if you happen to call me, then you might want to get a shovel and dig it out and bring it to my office, because that is going to cut your legal fee probably 75% and make things easier. So if you're going to get married, it's a difficult conversation to have with your spouse, but it's very useful, because if the two of you are going to make decisions together going forward about money and who's going to do what and roles in your marriage, start by having this one. See how you do. Because if you can't agree on these things, you probably want to think twice about bringing children into this world, because they will complicate the crap out of everything else that you do. So I always say that, I think it's been determined now scientifically that having children is one of the worst decisions that a human being can do to themselves, both psychologically, physically, and financially. However, I have two, and I could tell you it is the greatest gift to have. So for every trouble and every stressful situation that they bring, there's about 100-fold of joy and pleasure that they add to you and to your life, just like being married. So at the end of this lecture, I've said some really scary stuff. So my thing is this: marriage is a beautiful thing. It really is. But it rides on one factor. You have to be with the right person. Okay? And this person, there's a lot more than just physical or sexual attraction, or the fact that you guys have fun together. It's a partnership. It's a bond. It's something much higher. But if you find that person and all these things line up, don't worry about people like me, and don't worry about everything else. Do it. Get married. Work on your marriage. And when things get really bad and you fight and things are not looking happy, still keep working on it. Keep going to the therapist. Don't go to the morgue, okay? Keep working on it, because some marriages are worth saving. But at the same time, if you've made a bad decision and you are in one of those toxic ones, that thing is going to be like cancer, okay? If you diagnose it quickly, you come to us, we'll cut it out. Stage 1 or 2, you will survive. You come to us when it's stage 4, there's a good chance it'll kill you, but it'll certainly cost a ton of money. All right? But if you guys are interested in any of this, I'm here. If you want to ask questions, let me know, and thank you very much.